Welcome back to Pour Temecula, or if it's your first time listening, thank you. We're your hosts, Rick DeLucio and Shannon Cole. We welcome back author, winemaker, and mythbuster extraordinaire, Rob Crissell. You may remember Rob from our early episodes covering Temecula wine history, or his book, Temecula Valley Wineries. But today, we're digging into our local wine scene's perceptions and misperceptions. From claims that Temecula wines are overpriced or are made only from purchased fruit, to questions about the climate, quality, and yes, even almond orchards and truffles, Rob walks us through the myths he recently addressed in a talk to local wine servers. Let's dive in. Cheers. Welcome back to Pour Temecula. Today we welcome back our very first Pour Temecula guest, the author of Temecula Valley Wineries, the world's foremost authority on avocado wine, and a true local legend, Rob Crissell. Since our last conversation, Rob has earned, very proudly I might say, a double gold medal at the Orange County Fair for his 2022 Pinot Noir, and delivers talks about Temecula Valley to various groups around San Diego and Temecula, and specifically the Temecula Valley Wine Growers Association. One of his recent talks was dispelling Temecula Valley wine myths and misconceptions. So, Rob, welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me again, Rick. I appreciate it.
So,
Shannon?
Before we dive into these myths and misconceptions, why don't you tell us what you've been drinking, and then give our listeners a bit of an overview on how these talks go and what you talk about specifically in them.
Sure. I had to think a lot about what I've been drinking lately because
You drink too much.
I probably drink a little too much, but no, I drink just the right amount, I think. But the wine I've really been enjoying lately is an unusual wine called Sagrantino, which is an Italian wine from central Italy. And the only place I've had it, or even sought it out, is at Cougar Winery, which is right next door to where we're broadcasting from now. And Rick and Jen over there have, over the years, as you probably know, sort of been grape evangelists, bringing back unusual for America varieties to Temecula. And so Sagrantino is one of them. I just really have fallen in love with it. It's never going to be a Cabernet Sauvignon, but it has similar qualities in that it's very approachable, easy to drink, a lot of dark fruit, and they don't put very much oak into it, but just enough. Age it for about 2 or 3 years, and it's fresh, fruit forward, and a great wine, I think, with Italian food.
I believe Botaya also has a Sagrantino.
Good. So we need to have more of it, for sure.
I don't know who else would have one in the area, but I know for sure Botaya did.
Good.
It's a grape known for its really high tannins, too. So I taught a class a couple years ago, and it was all about the most high tannic grapes that are out there. So you're talking Petite Syrah, you're talking about Graffiano, and Aglianico is not that bad.
Really?
Compared to Sagrantino is really, really high, considered one of the highest that's out there. And throwing in Malbec and then Cabernet Sauvignon, which is a little bit the most balanced approach of all those. But Sagrantino was from Italy, and it was a very powerful structural wine.
Yeah, and I would say that the Cougar version, I don't have much experience with Sagrantino, but the version over there that I'm drinking certainly is not very tannic. It's well balanced, but it is aged for Temecula a little longer than the average wine in 4 or 5 years, I'd say. And so it seems to be smooth and well balanced. But maybe I just have higher tolerance for tannins. I don't mind tannins. I like them.
Okay. All right. So tell everybody about the classes that you teach and sort of the reactions that you get and the things you talk about.
Yeah. So after I wrote the newspaper columns and then wrote the book in 2023, Temecula Valley Wineries, I began teaching classes in Temecula, but all around San Diego County, sometimes to senior groups, sometimes to historical societies. But in the last year or so, Temecula Valley Wine Growers Association, of which I'm a member, approached me and asked me to teach the history course. They always offer a history course a couple times a year, the history of Temecula Valley wineries. And so I got to do that last May. It took place at Wilson Creek. We had about 15 to 20 people there, and it was really a wonderful thing. I put up my slides, and I it's a conversation. I do a wine tasting at the same time. And in this case, I did something different, which is to put a list of what I would call wine myths, misperceptions, and exaggerations and stereotypes. And we talked about that because the members of the class are primarily servers at the local wineries. It's sort of a service to the members of the Temecula Valley Wine Association to kind of get them educated. And so I've lived in this valley for more than 20 years and gone to these wineries, and so I've been guilty of repeating a lot of these myths and maybe perpetuating them. And I've heard very smart people say the same, and sometimes those myths are firmly myths and not true at all, and sometimes there's a lot of fact, a lot of truth in them. So we had a nice conversation about that.
All right, you want to try and knock some of these out?
Mm-hmm.
I get to play bad cop here, and
Sure.
Rob's going to be good cop. Just me stating it does not necessarily mean that I agree with any of these statements whatsoever. So if someone's going to hold them against me, please do at your own risk.
Sure.
All right, you ready?
Yes.
Okay. Temecula is not a serious wine region like Napa Valley or Paso Robles.
Right. So you hear that a lot, mostly from people who are visiting from, well, anywhere other than Temecula. But even local Temeculans have a little bit of contempt for their own wines, even if they've never been anywhere else. In my experience, having been to Paso and Napa and other places, we are and have become, I'd say, in the last 15 years, a serious wine region. Does that mean that every single one of our wines is amazing? Does it mean every single one of our wineries is trying to achieve the best they can do? Not necessarily. But what I think it means is we have winemakers and viticulturalists and owners in this valley who, yes, benefit from the 15 to 20 million people that live around here. We get a lot of people here. But they're also trying to further what we have been as a region in the last 3 decades. They're trying to make improvements in viticulture, in the way they treat the vines in the field, obviously, and then they're hiring some of the best winemakers and keeping them on and paying them and throwing a lot of money and expertise at our wine. For me, that makes us a serious wine region. If you're not a serious winery now, if you're not a serious wine owner or wine partnership, then your winery will get blown out of the water. There's too much competition. We're too small an area. You get a reputation very quickly if all you're doing is serving wine slushies and having party buses. You can do those things, but if you don't also offer a really high quality product, at least a portion of your inventory of very high quality, then you will not survive very long in this valley. So the ones that survive are serving some high quality wine.
So you're saying owners, they only care about the party buses.
Exactly. You have to care about the party buses a little bit. I mean, if you have invested $10, $15, $20 million in the infrastructure of a new winery in particular, and I won't name names, but, being a big winery doesn't mean you're a bad winery at all. Being a small winery doesn't make you a good winery. But if you've invested all that money, then you need all sorts of revenue streams. And that includes your wine clubs, your reserve tastings, but it also includes your party buses and appealing to your bachelorette parties and doing weddings maybe and having a restaurant or food trucks. You've got to have all those different ways to make money because you have, especially the newer wineries, you've paid a lot for the land, for the winemaker, for the infrastructure, and you have to care about that to a certain extent or else you will not grow and you will not compete. but it's not the only thing you should be caring about.
So owners, they don't care about the quality of the wine. They good winemakers don't stay here. All they want is money. Money,
Right.
money, money.
Right. You hear that if you go on our local Temecula Facebook page and it's more like a bunch of gossip. They all have disdain for the owners here because they think they're just out for the money. But there are so many other ways to make money, so many easier ways to make money. People who buy wineries or who develop wineries, generally speaking, love wine. And they don't want to drink bad wine any more than their customers do. And so I would say that the vast majority of winery owners care about the quality of their wine and are willing to pay their winemakers and recruit winemakers who care about it even more and spend the money on technology and barrels and products that are going to make their wine better. So yeah, no, that's a big myth.
All right. None of the wineries around here make their wine on location. They buy juice, they source it from somewhere else, and they're just all a bunch of off-site companies.
Right. Before COVID, I would have instantly said that's a complete myth. When COVID came around, a lot of the wineries sort of pulled back on their winemaking because they were a little nervous about the future. And then when it turned out, oh man, everybody's going to the wineries, everybody's buying wine during those 1 or 2 years after COVID, there was some bringing in of juice and shiners. But that represents a very small percentage, and always has been in this valley, and still represents a small percentage of whatever wine is being offered. So maybe there'll be 10 or 15% of what's offered. Sparkling wines, traditionally, as you know, Rick, are made off-site. It's hard to make a sparkling wine. Some will even get that sparkling wine from the valley or somewhere else, or some will just have it made at another of the Temecula wineries that make it. But for the most part, Temecula wine is made with Temecula grapes, often estate-grown Temecula grapes, on their property, especially at the smaller wineries, obviously. But as a winery gets to be 20 or 30,000 cases, it's hard to source the variety of wines they want. And so, yeah, occasionally they'll buy juice. But again, vast majority of wineries grow their own grapes, make their own wine on site.
Temecula wines are overpriced compared to other regions.
Well, that's a tough one. I've been to all sorts of other regions. What I hear most from my other wine-loving friends who are not as dedicated to Temecula Valley wines as I am is that, Rob, why would I go and buy a $40 or $50 or $70 bottle of red wine from a Temecula winery when I can go to Total Wine and buy something from Italy or France or Napa for half or a quarter of the price? That is a valid point. It's a valid point. You have to want to buy Temecula wine because you are buying something unique. You live in the area, you live in Southern California, you want to drink local, and there are certain things that a Temecula wine brings to the table that those other wine regions do not. Is it worth 20 or 30 or 40%, say, for a cab from Temecula compared to a cab from Napa? Because oftentimes you'll find a mid-level Napa wine that is cheaper than a Temecula wine. Often you'll find that. That's something that I think is a subjective deal. In my opinion, we are overpriced, but, and I think I've told this story before, I've talked to a very prominent winery owner who has told me that one year he ran out of all his wine mid-season. This was maybe, 10, 20, 15 years ago. And he said, never again am I going to let that happen. He said, I sell my wine for the price I sell it for because people buy it for that price. If they start not buying it for that price, then I'll lower the price. So they sell it for the high price that they sell it for because they can demand those prices. I would like to see our wineries begin to sort of, I can't say lower their prices. Let me put it this way. I think they will begin to lower their prices because we've seen demand lessen, not just here in Southern California, but across the world. We've seen wine drinkers change their habits. Demand has softened a bit, and Temecula is starting to feel that. Well, guess how you improve that? You lower the price of your product, and I think that's coming.
All right, changing gears here a little bit. It's too damn hot in Temecula, and it's getting hotter all the time. You cannot do white grapes here.
Oh, yeah. See, that was what I drilled down on at this latest meeting with the Temecula Valley Wine Growers Association people, because there is a reputation in Temecula that we can't grow white wines, which is so ironic because Temecula used to be known for only growing white wines. A lot of people don't understand that Callaway, which used to grow up until about 1990s, about 70% of all of Temecula wine was made at Callaway. At one point, they were distributing 300,000 cases annually. And all of it was white wine. All of it was Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, Chenin Blanc, Riesling. In fact, I think their motto was, white wine, it's all we do. Very subtle. And so for people to tell me now that the pendulum has swung the other way, we had Pierce's in the late 90s, a lot of those, all those Chardonnay plantings, a lot of them were yanked out. A lot of the Chenin Blanc, Riesling, they were yanked out, and red wine was planted. That coincided with this, this French paradox phenomenon where all of a sudden 60 Minutes told us that the French are living longer. Why? Because they're drinking red wine and eating butter, but mostly drinking red wine. So once they put out there, overnight, our wine drinking habits changed, and suddenly red wine became the fashion. And that has been the case for the last 25 years. And so Temecula reflects that. And so sometimes I think we tell people that we are better at red wine here, that really we're a red wine region, because red wine is what people, for the most part, drink. That might be changing too, but that's what we drink. And guess what? What sells more, red wine or white wine for the most part? Red wine. So we've planted a bunch of red wine grapes. We make a bunch of red wine. We're going to push that stuff. But in my opinion, even though we've had some gradual warming, we're talking about 2 degrees over the last 80 years. It's not a significant enough of a change to sort of not enable us to still grow high quality white grapes. However, I would also say we always have to be mindful of acid. Here, we get high alcohol, we get lower acids, and so our white wines can tend to be a little cloying. Maybe they can tend to be a bit flat. When that acid goes down, sometimes we over acidify. The winemakers do, and that will create some components in the wine that we don't like. So there's challenges to white wine cultivation here, or white grape cultivation, but the challenge is worth it because white wine is never going away. As I get older, I prefer a white wine and a rosé, and we have some wonderful, wonderful white wines here, even Chardonnays, but we have some wonderful Roussins and Viogniers and Vermentinos, so some Italian and Spanish style wines are nice. As you probably know, the
Verdejo is another one out of Central Spain. That the Rueda is a very, very inland, hot area of Spain, and that grape does really well. I mean, there's grapevines there that are hundreds of years old, not hundreds, but over 100. So
Yeah, absolutely. And for example, Wien's winery just took double gold. Actually, they took the number one, I want to say, I don't know what they call it, but like wine of the year at the Orange County Commercial Wine Grower Competition. They took wine of the year for their Arnase. Temecula Arnase gets wine of the year at this competition with thousands of other wines. So I think that's fantastic. So yeah, it is a myth. We can grow plenty of white wines. We might have to be a little more judicious on the varieties we choose and the locations we plant them and how we handle them in terms of the viticulture. But it's a complete myth that we are solely a red wine region.
Were you going to steal my thunder? Because I was going to say that Temecula only makes red blends, and they can't produce high quality Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Pinot Noir, you name it.
Yes, I know.
Everything is just immature and sweet.
Well, anyone who's been to Temecula knows that that's not the case. We certainly have a lot of wonderful dry red wines here and some excellent examples of all those things you mentioned. I've had some excellent cabs that I think would compare to anywhere in the world. Some wonderful Cab Francs. They seem to express themselves well here. And of course, I don't know if Syrah was on your list, but I think Syrah is a red grape that everyone acknowledges does well here, as does Grenache and a few other hot weather grapes. But Merlot, I'll talk to some very experienced wine growers and winemakers in this area, and they will tell me that absolutely Merlot should not be grown here. It can be grown here, but maybe it doesn't express itself as well. I would push back and just say it has expressed itself well. It will continue to do so. But you have to look for the right clones, the right conditions, the right locations in the vineyard, and you probably have to be judicious and do all these other things in the cellar that are going to help bring that wine to be the best it can be in Temecula. And if it's the best in Temecula, it'll compete anywhere. If it's average for Temecula, then, you've made a not so good wine there. But no, Pinot Noir, they're right about that. You don't want to grow Pinot here. They're trying to do some of that stuff up in La Cresta and in the hills above Temecula. And I think the jury's out. But in my opinion, having made as you expressed it, my Pinot, award-winning Pinot, I got those grapes, of course, from Santa Rita Hills up in Santa Barbara County.
And see, you're a sellout. You are a sellout. You live here, and you go off and you buy other grapes.
Well, I didn't buy Cab up there. I bought Pinot, and I do believe that Pinot is very sensitive to heat, of course. And when you start heating up Pinot, you're either left with raisins on the vine, or you're left with very low-acid, flabby grapes that you do not want to make wine out of. So, yes, I'm a sellout, but just for Pinot.
To go along with that, people don't age. And I thought, okay, I'm reading a little statement here that Rob has said that people have asked. And one of them is, Temecula doesn't age their wines long enough, which, if anything, I find the opposite to be true personally. I think there's too much barrel time. I think there's too much, sometimes new barrel time. And there's various reasons for that.
I agree.
Do people really think we don't age them long enough? And I think there's two parts of that.
Yeah.
One is aging in the barrel, and the other would be aging outside the barrel in the bottle after it's been bottled.
Right, which I think none of us has much of a problem with as wine lovers and wine aficionados. Once you get it out of the barrel, of course the wine is still going to age and mature, but in a different way, and it's just much less vulnerable to all sorts of bad things that it is facing inside the barrel. I agree with you. I think the reason why we got a reputation for selling young wine is early on it was white, so of course that was all young wine, of course. But also at our peak, when some of these wineries were selling out of their wine or selling so much so quickly and their wine clubs were flush like they'd never been, they were pushing out their wines too quickly, within 2 years of say, a 1 year of a bottle date, a red wine. And they would tell me things. Oh, you want to lay this down. Well, if somebody in Temecula tells me to lay down a wine, I'm dropping that wine club because there's just no reason in 2020, in the 2020s, let's say, to lay down a wine. We're making our wines in such a way that they should be drinkable right away. They might not be their best right away, but they're drinkable right away. And these were too tight. They were too tannic. They were not ready for prime time. So maybe that's how it got its reputation. But I agree with you, Rick. The problems I've seen with Temecula is people keeping their red wine in the barrel for extended periods of time. Sometimes that is an economic consideration, especially right now in the last 2 years, where they have so much inventory in bottle that they can't really afford to put those wines that are all in barrel into bottle. There's not enough room. They don't want it to sit there. So they say, well, let's just keep it going and keep those in there another year or 2 years until we sell out of our 2019. Then we'll release our 2021s. But the problem with that, of course, is, and I don't know whether it's something about our grapes or if it's just the nature of all barrel aging, or maybe it's sometimes some people say might have a little VA issues, or sometimes maybe it's our lower acidity levels. I feel like Temecula wines don't age as well in the barrel as some of the cooler climate places. Having said that, my palate, I was going to say this in a very sophisticated way. I like younger wines. I like fruit-forward, fresh wines, and you don't get that when you're drinking a 6-year-old wine that was just released, and there's several wineries that really believe in that. And maybe they didn't top off those barrels quite enough. Maybe they even chose to do it as an aesthetic thing. They want a little more rusticity. I don't like my wines rustic. I don't like any bit of oxidation. I don't like any bit of Brett. All these things that some people like, I think are not a modern winemaker's or wine drinker's preference. And so I prefer minimal amount of barrel aging, minimal amount of new oak, and then into the bottle you go, and preserve it as long as you can in the barrel until it comes just perfect, and then release it, get it out the door.
I agree 100%. All right, last question before we get on to Rob. Well, Rob gets to redo the Pour Tasting Challenge. I've lived here 7.5 years. I think Shannon's here. You've lived here, 3 years? 5 years now. She's saying 5 years. I'm struggling to find the almond orchards as well as this new thing, these truffles. Where can I find the almond orchards
and the truffles? And
the truffles here in Temecula?
Well, right. The almonds you're referring to, of course, are for you're going to get me in trouble, but for the Wilson Creek almond champagne. Now, some people ask me, especially the senior homes that I go to, when I say there's blueberry and hints of plum and maybe even a little tobacco, and they say, well, do they infuse the wines with that? I'm like, no. They don't infuse the wine. But of course, you have to say, except with almond champagne, there's a little infusion of almonds or whatever they're choosing to flavor that champagne with. Now, the Wilson Creek people are wonderful. They're experienced. Gus Vizgerda was the old winemaker. Christina Filippi is a fantastic new winemaker. They have maybe the best viticulturalist in the valley, and Greg Pennyroyal. They're a great group of people. And I believe, I won't put words in their mouth, but even they will say that their almond champagne, which is not made on site, but made up in the valley, is appealing to a certain segment of their demographic and is well liked. People like sweet things, and they have always loved sweet things, and they will continue to do it. And so that almond champagne is puts us on the map sometimes in an unfavorable light, but I think Temecula is strong enough and solid enough that we can survive it. And even Wilson Creek is strong enough that they could survive their own almond champagne. But man, I remember talking to a friend of mine. Sorry, I'm getting off track, but I remember talking to a young trainer, personal trainer of mine. He was probably, 24, and he has just started drinking wine. And his favorite winery, of course, was Wilson Creek. And I said, okay, well, I go there a lot, and they've got a couple good a few good wines. But which ones do you like? He said, I like the wine slushies. I said, the wine slushies. And I realized this kid is 25 years old. You got to start somewhere. And so he's starting with wine slushies, and I bet you anything, 10 years later now, he doesn't like wine slushies nearly as much. But that's how you start. That's your gateway drug. And I think a lot of Temecula wineries like to appeal to as broad a cross-section of guests as possible. So they all have a sweet wine. And so there's nothing wrong with that, but you still want to keep the fine, still wines your top priority.
All right, well, I'll keep looking for them. Maybe one of these days they'll turn up.
Truffle pig will have to
The truffle
later.
pig will assist in finding the truffles and the almonds at the same time.
Sounds like that's going to be a great restaurant, though, that Renzoni and Galliano are putting together there at the old Avensol winery. And I have to disclose that I am creating the Robert Renzoni coffee table book for them. So I'm not entirely objective, but I'm sure that Olivia and all the folks at Renzoni are going to do a great job with the Truffle Pig Winery.
Well, you just gave yourself another plug. So, is there any before we take a break and we pour out a couple wines for Rob? He gets a little redo challenge on the Pour Temecula challenge. Is there anything that you want to plug upcoming? You got any speeches or anything like that you're doing?
No, I'll just mention that my book California Avocados: A Delicious History, which is the only history book about the California avocado industry, is out in stores and on Amazon. Get your copy. It's an exciting story. People don't know how important avocados have been over the last 150 years, but it's a cool story.
All right, thanks, Rob. We'll be right back. All right, we are back with Rob Crissell, who has two red wines in front of him. One is from Temecula, one is not from Temecula, somewhere else in the world. It is the same varietal, or in California legal speak, it is the majority of that varietal, so which counts as the same. So, Rob, I will pass it to you. Shana's also with us today. She has no ideas what the wines are either, and she's gonna take a guess at them as well.
Okay.
So, yep.
Well, I gotta admit, I am lost on this wine. It is, to me, they're very comparable in terms of their taste. They both have the same qualities. Actually, I kind of, they're sort of a, what would you call this? A bright ruby wine, and totally clear, although that one's shinier and clearer, but high tannins, high alcohol. I felt like there was a lot of fruit on the nose, really nice cherry, and it's diminishing now, and I don't know, I'm certainly getting a lot of alcohol on the nose, but some caramel in there, which made me think that the one on the left at least has seen some oak. One on the left is wine number 1, and wine number 2, little less oaked, higher tannin. Both of them are pretty high in alcohol. On the palate, it's sort of a, I guess, medium plus acidity, and kind of a medium plus tannins for sure. A lot of drying out and a little burn, which indicates the alcohol. Okay, do you want me to guess the variety first, or the where they're from?
Whichever.
The mic.
Okay.
Oh, you don't have the mic. Oh, God, my bad.
I'm sure it'll pick me up in the background.
Right. Well, I don't know. I guess I want to say, I told you I wanted to say Nebbiolo, but I wanted to say maybe like either a Grenache or it could be a Sangiovese. I would say because of the alcohol, maybe it could be a Grenache or a Grenache blend. So I guess I'll go with that. I frankly don't know. Certainly the high alcohol would indicate Grenache, and I would say, I'll probably get this completely wrong, the one on the left is probably, what is it, number 1, is probably the Temecula wine, and the one on the right, which seems to be kind of a better nose, little higher in tannins, I would say maybe that is the wine from somewhere else. So, yeah, that's my guess. I have a very low degree of confidence in that guess.
I'm actually with you. Grenache was my first thought when I tasted these. They are both definitely high alcohol. I think wine number 1, the one on the left, smells like a jammy berry, like strawberry cherry pie.
For sure.
The one on the right, wine number 2, also has a lot of fruit on it, but when you drink it, it's got this, I think you used the word astringent earlier. It's got something else in there.
On the finish.
On the finish, yeah. I also think wine number 1 is Temecula, just because of how jammy it is. My first thought was Grenache, but I also am thinking maybe Zinfandel now. Something else fruitier. It could also be Barbera, but I feel like the tannins are too high to be Barbera.
Okay, so I have the mic again. Okay, you are right. The first wine is from Temecula. I will give you the second wine is from Spain.
Oh.
Does that change maybe where you're going to think now, just knowing that? Maybe what varietal would you have missed?
I guess it's probably Tempranillo. Or, I mean, it could be Grenache, but it could be Tempranillo then.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Tempranillo.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, what else could it be in Spain? We've got...
WSET studies, where have you gone?
Yeah. No, I don't know. Yeah, Tempranillo.
Yeah, we just did 2 episodes on certification. All right, we're back here. Wine number 1 is from Altissima Winery here in Temecula. It is a blend of 88% Tempranillo. A little bit of Petit Syrah and a little bit of Malbec is also in the blend to sort of round it up. The alcohol level is 14.9%.
Oh. So
it is a little boozy. And I think that you could pick that up. The second wine is also from 2021. It's from Ribera del Duero in the center of Spain. It is a Tempranillo from PSI, which is the second label of probably one of the 2 best Ribera del Duero's, Pingus, which is a well-known wine from that area, 100% Tempranillo. Ribera del Duero has a reputation for being a bigger structured wine of Tempranillo than, say, like what Rioja produces from Tempranillo, which can be softer and more elegant and also have a little bit Grenache blend and then other things blended in with it. Whereas Ribera del Duero and also Toro, I think maybe come closer to kind of the style of wine that we produce of Tempranillo here.
Hotter, maybe.
Hotter, the temperatures it's barren in some places. Yeah. The vines are really old. We don't really have old vines here in Temecula, but it gets hot and it can create a more structured, more in-depth, more high alcohol wine. And this clocks in at 14.5%. So kind of truer to that style.
Yeah.
So I think you picked up on the things that, they weren't super far off. But I think the second wine, to me, had a little bit more of a kind of potential to be more balanced in the long term. It was a wine that you could taste and sort of see that this is something made for aging, something that would be better in 5 years. Whereas the first one, it kind of is what it is.
I totally agree, although I do prefer that I'm glad I prefer the Temecula wine in this case. I don't think I did last time, but I do here because it's a people pleaser right off the bat. It doesn't quite have that finish, which maybe you're talking. Maybe there's that's acid we're tasting. Maybe it's going to age a little bit better, whereas maybe this Temecula wine is not. But yeah, I absolutely agree. This is drinkable right now, the Temecula wine. But I actually enjoyed it. I thought it was nice. A little less tannic, I think, than the Spanish wine.
Oh, I think so. I think the tannin advantage is pretty light on that one, on the first one, the one from Temecula. So it is meant to be very approachable. It was recently rated. I think it got a 91 from the Wine Enthusiast.
Wow.
And the price point is about $70, which is about twice the price of the Ribera del Duero wine. So,
yep, that is.
Again, this comes back to your myths and misconceptions that we talked about earlier.
Right.
So,
would you, if you're being forced to buy one of these wines in the store and you like them both about equally, which I think is a fair assessment, are you going to buy the $70 bottle or are you going to buy the $35 bottle? That's where Temecula is right now, and why our bottle sales and memberships have not been as robust as they have been in recent years. And I think these wineries might have to adjust their pricing to be a little more competitive, but we'll see if that happens. Thank you, though. Those were delicious wines.
You're welcome. So now I know last time we did ask you about what you would prefer to pair with In-N-Out. Are you going to stick with Cabernet? I think you said Cabernet.
No, I regretted that decision right away. After
so
I
you
left,
got a redo on that.
I do. In fact, I thought about that question the other day when I was at In-N-Out for my daughter, because I don't generally eat it, but I do eat it occasionally. Let's see. I'd say, it's super salty. It needs a big, pretty bold, I think, a high acid wine. I kind of like a Malbec or even a Syrah with that. I think those would handle it better than the sort of more fruit forwardness and the softness of a Cabernet Sauv. I think I kind of like the idea of a Malbec. I'll go with a Malbec.
Would you drink either of these two wines with it? I would
absolutely.
So. I think the first wine would probably go pretty solid. The ripeness that's in the fruit with the kind of the sweeter edge that's in In-N-Out too.
And that alcohol, I think, would pair really nicely too. Yeah.
All right. Well, there you go. All right. If you're interested, we did interview Rob quite some time ago. One of our first two podcasts were the history of Temecula wine, and Rob sat down for. And if you go back into whatever podcast software, they'll be sitting there waiting for you. So once again, thank you, Rob, for coming on.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Shannon.
Right. Cheers.
Bye.
Thanks again, Rob. We always appreciate you taking some time out of your day to come onto our show. So let's take a moment to talk about a grape that Rob and I mentioned at the top of the episode, Sagrantino. It's one of the many fascinating indigenous Italian varieties that's found a second home in Temecula Valley. While still rare and limited to just a few local producers like Botaya, Poggiogliano, and Cougar Winery, Sagrantino is turning heads for its bold personality, thick skins, and very powerful tannins, traits that thrive in our warm, sunny climate. It's part of a growing trend toward heat-loving grapes that align with Temecula's terroir and help shape a distinct regional identity. Shannon and I will be diving deeper into these lesser-known Italian red wines like Negro Moro, Terraldigo, Aglianico, Antipulciano, in an upcoming episode, so stay tuned for that. Originally from Umbria and central Italy, Sagrantino is most famously grown around the hilltop town of Montefalco. Montefalco, Sagrantino DOCG, is one of the biggest, boldest red wines that come out of Italy or really anywhere. It's inky, it's deeply structured and built for a lot of aging. In Italy, it's often held back for years to help tame its fierce tannins, spending long stretches in oak and in the bottle before release to help smooth it out. Despite its relative obscurity, it's a grape with a lot of depth and authenticity, one that a lot of people prize for its aging potential and serious structure. Temecula-grown Sagrantino tends to mirror its Italian roots with these big aromas of baked plum and leather and spice and a touch of dried herbs too. When it's aged in oak, you can get notes of clove and cocoa, baking spices, and cigar box. Or sometimes I get like a cigarette ash. On the palate, I can't stress this enough. It's huge. It's got big muscular tannins. It's bold with dark fruit, and it is got this dry, savory, bitter finish to it. Imagine a more rustic version and earthy version of Petite Syrah. So if you're familiar with that out of California, just amp it up about turn that dial to 10, and that's what you get out of Sagrantino. They're just both just deep wines, deep colored wines. They got a lot of structure to them, so you're talking acid, tannin, body, all that kind of stuff. You feel it in your mouth. It's chewy. But Petite Syrah is a little more sweet with kind of lush black fruits compared to Sagrantino, which has more that grippy, fruity bitterness and feels kind of rustic and old world. It's not a wine for the faint of heart. And if I'm being honest with you, it is not really a wine I personally reach for. But hey, every palate's different, and be your own judge. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to Pour Temecula and leave us a review. It really helps us keep the conversation flowing. Follow us on social media for behind-the-scenes content and updates on upcoming guests. Until next time, keep exploring, keep sipping, and cheers.